Cool, we'll kick off. Hi everyone, thanks for joining the session. Just in terms of introductions, who am I? My name's Abba Datacom, spelled as Abba, but I say Abba, and I'm part of the Datacom team, and I look after our application security and tech services as the lead. And we have a few people here from Datacom today, and our booth is represented by our AppSec and pen testing team. And my background is around security engineering and testing, where I've led a few teams, and then back in the day, started as an analyst, senior analyst, and IT analyst. And what we're here to talk about is breach and attack simulation and how it fits into the idea of security testing when we're thinking about controls. So as a quick intro to the concept of BAS, BAS as a definition is how things like tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, that are used by real-world attackers can actually be replicated or simulated across the environment to be able to test controls, but then also to understand how your environment would be able to detect and prevent common cyber attacks. And then how it fits into a wider cyber testing is how it is within the validation and assessment space. And we are talking about more of a proactive approach to be able to perform a level of simulations to test controls. And what we like to be able to then formulate it into is how things like BAS can help with threat-informed defense. And so I think this diagram represents it really nice, where you have BAS sitting in the testing and evaluation area, very similar to things like pen testing, red teaming, and then how things like BAS can help with improving defenses. So when we think about like a blue team, how a blue team would be having things like threat intelligence and other sources of information to be able to sharpen their tools. Things around BAS can help with the simulations, and then understand how some of our security controls, think EDR, think next generation firewalls, think web application firewalls, how they're able to detect and prevent common attacks, common TTPs. So that is a nice flow, and the idea is that it can be iterative to be able for teams to form from a blue team to with a red team into a purple teaming type methodology. How we like to break BAS and the assessment types into is what we call control-centric and threat-centric. And the concepts is pretty clear in the names, but when we think about control-centric, we see things like credential harvesting, malware samples. Those are from the scenarios of TTPs, how then they fit into the controls themselves. So common controls like EDR have behavior analysis and signature detection, and then from there would be policies that are set on common, like say EDR, and those would be like maybe specific to just detection or prevention, and then that is the sitting control that we would be testing in the scenario. And then you have the threat-centric one, which is more around, as the name says, threats, and these assessments are bundled up. So the assessments will have a number of TTPs. And this can be around controls like the web application firewall, so then there will be application or web application specific attacks, think like SQL injection, cross-site scripting. But then you also have more infrastructure level TTPs. So that might be on like a Windows desktop, things around PowerShell scripts, VBA type scripts, that's then fed into common attack chains and those TTPs. We quite often get asked the question, and even with the demo we had yesterday, how does BAS fit into and align with our more traditional security testing approaches? And when we break it down, we find that BAS has the best, I guess, correlation with the idea of security validation and control validation, and it's very complementary. So an organization might have a tool set, and that's going across their, say, entire external exposure or footprint, and then we'll look at like how their security controls are working. And BAS, from a control-centric point, is that's what it's doing. And then when we think about exposure management and vulnerability assessments, that's more focused on identifying what could be vulnerabilities across your infrastructure or your applications. But when we think about BAS, BAS is not really around identifying vulnerabilities, it's more around how the simulations can help understand how your controls are working. And then pen testing, red teaming, a lot of us know what they are, but we don't see BAS as being a replacement of pen testers, hopefully, because they'll affect our types of jobs, but then also around how it can be complementary. So the idea is how can some of these packaged simulations help a pen tester, and what we will show in the demos is a few examples that a lot of the baseline health checks can be automated with a tool set like this to be able to save pen testers time, so you can do more of the fun things that every pen tester or red teamer likes to do. Across BAS, we still see it as a journey. So with organizations trying to implement a new concept and this type of testing approach. At Datacom and how we work with our partners, starting with what we call as crawl, and that's more point in time. So we might get asked, hey, we want to just run a cyber simulation once a year. And we would come in, we would help that customer with that point in time testing. But the idea is that it's still automated and the customer would be able to get a report. Why it's important in this situation is it can take the spin of being control-centric or it can be threat-centric. So if the simulation needs to be around, hey, we want to test how effective our CrowdStrike EDR is, that might be one specific assessment we look at running. And then the other one is, no, we want the simulation to be a threat. So, we had an incident that was around, say, spear phishing and how a bad actor was able to be able to pop one of our users. Now we want this to be used as an awareness activity where we run these simulations over a period. This type of point-in-time package can be really useful for that. And then you get into walk, and that's more frequent testing or assessments. And the idea is that that can be run across, say, every month or every quarter. And that's really nice to be able to then help with like the control uplift. So for like a blue team, understanding how their detection policies are set, we find really good value with running it maybe, say, once a quarter. And then we have run. And run is more for our customers that have really advanced like controls, monitoring capabilities, but they also have the want to run complex simulations. And then what we would see is we get asked to run assessments as maybe frequently as once a week or every fortnight. And that would be really targeted. So the journey happens from crawl, walk, run, and within the run stage, you would have also the ability to customize certain assessments. So it wouldn't be as pre-packaged. You would be able to select really specific TTPs and then like formulate your own type of assessment. And that's really nice to then be able to get into the concepts of threat-informed defense as well as purple teaming, because that's how we see the journey happening over a period of time. So we did put a few slides together just to set the scene, but what we're really keen to do is to go through a few demos. And so the first demo and the reason why we're presenting it here today at the AppSec conference is how does it fit into a common application control that we put in front of a lot of our web apps. And this demo is not to say that any WAF is bad. It's more around as engineers or as developers, we know sometimes these requirements configure rule policies, maybe to make things work, or maybe a user was complaining about something, or there might be that need that when you bring in a WAF, you don't put it in block mode straight away, you just might want to log. And what this type of control validation through BAS can help you with is to know, there's those business requirements to maybe make that configuration that case, but is it in a way not allowing you to detect and prevent very trivial web attacks. And so the type of lab we have set up is that there is a protected app. That app is using a common cloud WAF, and that cloud WAF has the baseline OWASP rule set. So think the OWASP top 10, and a lot of people have been talking about it in the conference. It would be looking at rule sets around SQL injection, cross-site scripting, RCE, and other common web attacks. And in the scenario, what we're using as a platform for BAS is through our partner AttackIQ. So the workstation that's in the lab environment will have an AttackIQ agent that would, one, talk to the AttackIQ platform, but then it would also be able to target the URL of the web application. And we've also then been plugged in a SIEM to be able to do logging, so we know how the WAF's able to detect, prevent. So if we wanted to then, in the future, run this type of assessment in the future, we have those logs within our SIEM to be able to, and have it integrated into the AttackIQ platform. The second demo I'll go over is a common threat-centric assessment, and this is from Oil Rig 2022. It was a group and attack chain that started from initial access, just think a really basic word macro, to all the way to the right of exfiltrating passwords, and then across that attack chain or kill chain, there was things around executing PowerShell scripts, achieving persistence, being able to perform discovery from gaining initial access, and then being able to install a keylogger. How these assessments are put together is aligned to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So most of you would be aware of how it starts across from initial access to the concept of getting persistence, and then keeping that persistence to do things like exfiltration. So I see it as initial access is letting the bad guy in, or the bad guy trying to get in, to the bad guy trying to do some not so nice stuff in exfiltrating passwords. Cool, I'll stop there and I will bring up the platform we have, so just bear with me and hopefully it loads. There we go. So with the WAF example, like I mentioned, the assessment we're running is a really basic health check. And this health check is focused on the Azure WAF rule policy. That's for the OWASP top 10. And as trivial scanners, pen testers would try, you would run through test cases of SQL injection payloads, common payloads, cross-site scripting. Depending on the app as well, there could be things around PHP related attempts or attacks. And then if your application is also running Java, you're able to point certain test cases to your app just to know how the WAF is working. And then it also has things around known CVEs. So if I was to click on here and look at the results, it would have CVEs related to that web application. The nice thing then when we go through some of these is we can look at which of them were prevented and detected. So when we go through this list, you have the MITRE tactic. So that's the top level of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So when we think initial access, we have a WAF test when we're thinking about this one around LFI, or also known as local file inclusion, and is trying to retrieve within the etc host a certain encoded URL. And what this package will then, or this assessment will then run is common other examples like that across web attacks. And then it would look at how the WAF is preventing and detecting. So in this case, there's a lot of prevention that's been enabled, but not much in terms of detection. So that would help the engineer or the team that's managing the WAF to know how it's actually effectively working for very trivial web attacks. The other thing then, when you see this type of report, is around how it aligns to the MITRE-ATTACK framework. So in this case, because it's a lot more of a control-centric, what we would see is, according to the MITRE-ATTACK, it's really only at initial access. It's not trying to do anything around persistence or trying to escalate privilege, purely because this is a control-centric type test. So that's how we like to split it up. And then for the engineers that would then need to look at why things weren't prevented, detected, you also have common mitigations, and there might be mitigations around how the WAF would work. The part we like to also see is how over a trending period your controls are working. This is not as real life as a common WAF or like a WAF in production, but the idea is, as an engineer or as a security team, you can see how your control's working over that cadence of time you're running these control tests on. So hopefully that is clear around how that WAF type of test can be run. And then the other thing, being at OWASP and at the AppSec Day conference, is around hearing a lot about the OWASP Top 10. So there is a test case and a package to then look, and this is targeting that same WAF around really across the OWASP Top 10 categories. So think broken access control. There's a WAF test around certain bots, and then how that bot is able to run certain tests. And in this case, it's looking at were they prevented or not. So here we haven't actually tested for detection. So in some controls, you might not always have either prevention or detection. So you can look at selecting each of those. And then it will allow you to be able to look at the results and see. So this is also a nice one to just get that cost coverage for the OWASP Top 10 and then the common web attacks. Now I'll shift to the fun one, which is a threat-centric. So for any pen testers, red teamers, this is what we like to quite often see. We love attack chains, kill chains, all the way from initial access to things like exfiltration. One thing I really like about the platform, but even around BAS as well, is how it then can be represented or visualized across that kill chain. So this ORIG assessment, as I mentioned in the demo slide, is it's going through that initial access to exfiltration. And the demo that we have is, I have two windows here. This workstation one has a security control enabled, a very basic security control, which is the Microsoft Defender AV, and then a workstation 2 that has no security controls running. Hopefully, from that really basic example, we would see that the workstations that's not running any controls, there would be, it's not able to prevent or detect some of these test cases or TTPs. So that's where this type of example can help, is even for organization that's wanting to invest money in certain security controls, is to be able to do this proactively to show, hey, with the simulation, we're able to understand that because we have, in the case if we don't have EDR, how a simulation like this and common TTPs might not be detected or prevented. I'll go through some of the stages and just break it down. And so when we're thinking about the initial access for this example, it is doing some malware delivery, and a really basic one to try again initial access. And what you're able to then see is all the steps the assessment's tried to do. So it's tried to download the malicious Word doc and store that in memory. It's looked at then from memory to the file system and then further through. And then what you can look at is what was the response or the detection details that was passed through from your security control. So in this case, the security control that's in scope as a SIEM is Sentinel. And then in terms of alerts, it would have nothing because Sentinel hasn't actually passed through that alert. And then when we go through discovery and further down, it will go through the stages. So in this workstation, as I mentioned, it had that basic AV and then integrated with the SIEM. And then further down we go into actually persistence. It breaks it down into each of the, and exfiltration. It goes down into what steps were prevented and also ones that weren't executed. And then in the workstation that has no security controls, that same similar kill chain is tried. And in this case, we see a lot more of those initial access attempts not like prevented. So that can then help the blue team or the engineers to know where in the kill chain your security controls have become of value versus not. So this is really basic examples of how BAS from a control-centric and a threat-centric approach can help you. Cool, I'll just pop back into a few slides and then we'll go to some questions. So as I mentioned at Datacom, the service of BAS is something that we're really driving out. So if you're keen to know more, there's an email address here, and that can be just chat with us. It can be a demo of the platform and as well as proof of concept or pilot. And last slide, any questions from the group?
Hi, I was just wondering, is all the similar testing done through sort of the key column of initial access? You know, like if you're really good, you know, authentication and, you know, form validation and whatnot, I mean, it's still possible you could have an absolutely terrible back end, right? Is there anything sort of more directly to test that back end just in case it can be accessed? Or?
Okay, sorry, just for the group, the question is, can the assessment also, all these assessments test the back end, or is it just more around initial access? So if we were to want to test the back end, you could do it from a threat-centric approach. So depending on then which threat assessment you want to take. So just if we took one example, like if it was yesterday we demoed, Patrick demoed one of a Telerik vulnerability, that would also be able to test the initial access of that exploit, but then also the TTPs that were used by that threat group for the back end. But it would be purely around the threats that the simulation includes, but it would touch the back end or like your internal infrastructure. So you could take that approach. But when we're thinking about control-centric, it's more around testing that specific control. So in this, in the example, then if it's a WAF, it would be more around a lot of initial access TTPs or test cases run. Any other questions? Nope. Cool. Thank you, and thanks for joining the session.